There's a new way we have to begin thinking about our future because it is clear that all the timelines are coming together right now. Things aren't just moving in their own way anymore, they're crossing. Governments are meeting us in the workplace and we're standing right in the middle of a massive change. Decades from now, historians will look back at 2026 and ask, what happened? Because we can all feel it. This year looks vastly different from 2020 and it's worlds away from 2010. Overnight, our global priorities have shifted. But while the world is changing, we're still trying to figure out how to run our businesses and protect our livelihoods in the middle of it. The truth is, the days of business as usual are gone. We can no longer ignore the external factors that are bleeding into our day-to-day lives. We find ourselves in what I call the modern dark ages of business. In the rush to get bigger and faster, we've surrendered to blind automation, we've let efficiency replace empathy, and let algorithms replace our own gut intuition. If you feel like a firefighter instead of an architect, constantly trapped in a cycle of putting out fires and dealing with systems that just don't work, then you are experiencing what I call the reckoning. In this space, we talk about global wins, the needs and perspectives necessary to move us into a 2030 renaissance with a radically human approach. We don't just build efficient companies, we build breathable systems. We're not talking about spreadsheets today. We're talking about the fact that your team is mourning the world while they're answering your Slack pings. Welcome to the conversation on how we build the palace of our future and start with our own house. I'm Samantha Truman, and welcome to the Culture Room. We're here to talk about strategy, culture, and how we build systems that actually put humans first in this new AI era. My belief is simple. To survive what's coming, we need a strategy that is ready for the future and results that don't sacrifice our humanity in the process. I'm the founder of True People Consulting, a firm dedicated exactly to this. We believe that the future isn't waiting for us, and it's definitely not something we can ignore. We help forward-thinking organizations and societies future-proof themselves. We do this by designing what I call breathable systems, places where people, processes, and technology work together instead of fighting each other. For the past few years, I've stood at the intersection of some of our biggest challenges, from change management and health equity to systemic shifts in healthcare, academia, and major corporations. I spent thousands of hours assessing organizations and facilitating conversations with thousands of people on the topics that matter most. Because of that background, you're gonna hear me bring in history, you'll hear me analyze current affairs, and most importantly, you'll hear me say that I am comfortable being uncomfortable. As we move towards 2030, we are in the middle of a massive reckoning and a new renaissance. Life, as they say, is lifing right now. It is messy, it is fast, and is standing right in front of us. For some of you, it may make you feel uncomfortable, but this is a good thing. It means we're getting somewhere real. So enough talking about the problem, let's start really building towards the solution. For many of us, we like to look at business as a vacuum. You want to look at the entity of your business as separate infrastructure. I like to look at things as a macrocosm and then come down to the microcosm. Your business is one portion of the existential piece of creation. And you can't look at yourself in a vacuum. When you see policy shifts, trade wars, and government decisions that are made, they aren't separate things. They're really weather on the outside of your office. And as a result, you may see certain things have direct implications on your current business infrastructure. What happens in one system always bleeds into the next. So if a government shifts or a trade policy changes, your team feels that uncertainty before you even send the first email. For me, I was born in Ukraine, grew up in Jamaica, and spent much of my time in the United States. I understand what it looks like to have what we call mutual grief. One of the things that I see happening in institutions is quite often leaders want to separate what is happening externally from what is happening internally. When systems break externally, they do have direct implications on what is happening within your organization. Right now, as we speak in the United States, we are in a pivotal moment. As immigration reform has become something that is literally knocking on people's doors, I've heard and seen so many people say, I'm going to work and we're acting like this is normal. I'm in fear for my life, and I'm acting like this is normal. These are some of the things that we really need to consider. A lot of policy shifts and systemic things that are happening globally are bleeding into your workplace, whether or not you want to believe it. Because it's going to be very difficult for your team to perform effectively if they're worried about even going outside. Because of my own cultural experience, I know what it feels like to travel into different places and look at what is happening externally and try to make sense of it. And sometimes it does not make sense at all. When we're thinking about business and when we're thinking about good leadership, you have to navigate not only what is happening within the business, but look at the external implications of what is happening for your staff as well. Government rules and old physical buildings are stuck in the 20th century while businesses are moving at AI speed. This gap is creating friction, and leaders are essentially forced to become their own mini governments, taking care of things like employee security and mental health that unfortunately in some places the state is failing to provide. This is a real challenge for you as leaders moving forward. People have shared with me that some people are living in parallel universes. For some, they are literally in a state of absolute grief, and some in a state of peace. You as a leader may be worried about your Q3 targets, while your employee may be worried about a family in conflict or a collapsing economy back home. The lines are crossing in ways that we've never seen before. So I have a question for you as leaders. Can your workplace become a refuge? Work should not be another fire that people need to put out. If people spend a majority of their lives at work, it should be a reprieve, a place of refuge, not a place to run away from. We have global stress, then workplace stress, then home stress. It's compounding, and we have to stop the cycle. So when I think about this breathable system, I think about you controlling the breathability of that internal system as you're moving into this 2030 renaissance. Leadership is a lot about personal accountability. You are responsible for the vibe or the frequency of the room. You are responsible for the energy that you're bringing into the workplace. Most of the problems I see in assessments aren't necessarily process problems, they are people problems, and decisions start and end with people. With the most complex AI or political issues that we may have, they're essentially a series of people decisions. And if the people part is broken, you're gonna see that cascading throughout different areas of the business as well. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I did an assessment for a healthcare institution, and it came to be that there was a dosing issue within that organization. The physicians were dosing patients differently based on their race. And I know it sounds shocking, but unfortunately, when doing the investigation, though during the course of the investigation, it showed that no patients were harmed. When asking the physicians why they were doing this, they essentially shared that in school, they were taught that pain was different based on race and your racialized background. So we've known, and even up to 2016, there have been studies about Black pain within the United States, and we know that there is a variance in the belief systems around pain, specifically for Black and white individuals. When you have leaders, and in this case physicians, that are dosing patients incorrectly based on biases they've been taught in textbooks or by other providers, this is a human issue. So in that case, we did have to intervene. We had to do a lot of change management work and facilitation and really talk about the historical context and why this belief system came about. And it's not the first time something of this nature has happened. The good thing is that this organization took personal accountability and recognized they need help. So many times organizations sweep things under the rug and think they're okay. Now, your issues may not be as large or as challenging as that. It may be as simple as team members not showing where they're missing the mark because they don't feel psychologically safe. And where there is low psychological safety, there may be less communication within your teams. So these things start and end with people. And when we're thinking about business and when we're thinking about performance, people have to come first. Because in order for people to meet the mark and meet their goals, they need to feel safe and they need to feel as though they're within an environment conducive to their growth and even conducive to their truth telling. The truth is, people don't want to hear the truth. And where power may be, quite often, power does not want to be challenged. But if you want to see your business, your institution, your teams grow leaps and bounds, we have to be willing to start and end with the truth. Today, most leaders aren't actually leading. Most of them are firefighters trapped in a cycle of reacting to Slack pings, emails, and external policy shifts. I'll give you an example. In a recent role, I was an executive within a healthcare institution working very closely in the public health space in the United States. A new administration came into play, and when this new administration came into play, there were policy shifts that declared we could no longer use certain terminology or have certain practices around things like health equity. The word equity in itself was something that could no longer be used. And so when you're working closely with organizations in the public health space that had their funding slashed overnight, as well as policy shifts with regards to language usage, we saw leaders begin to recoil. They were operating in a state of fear, and so many people rushed to cover and save themselves. Overnight, websites disappeared. Overnight, job titles changed. Overnight, jobs disappeared. These are situations that have been happening frequently in certain spaces. And so when you're seeing that policy shifts are affecting the business, your mindset as a leader may not necessarily be, hey, what's happening on the other side of that screen with my team member? It may be, let's put this fire out and let's protect ourselves, not only as leaders, but as an institution, because things are out of our control. And for many people, these external fires are bleeding into the business so much that we have internal fires that we need to manage and mitigate. The true call of a leader is to be bigger and greater than the fear or a policy standing in front of you. Otherwise, you aren't carrying the work of the people, you're just carrying the weight of the crisis. If you can't find 8 hours in your week or in your month to think about your future, then you don't have a time problem, you have a systemic friction problem. We've been told that efficiency is the only goal, but we've pushed it so far that now we're sacrificing the soul and integrity of work and ourselves. Look at the United States healthcare system, for example, where physicians are forced to pump out patients every 15 minutes. This creates a factory-style environment that drains the physician and sacrifices the actual care that the patient receives. When pumping out results becomes a metric, you lose the integrity of the service. Efficiency is at the cost of exhaustion. This is not a win. It's a systemic failure that breaks the people involved, and we're talking about the staff as well as the patient population. Leadership isn't just a strategic plan on paper, it's a somatic experience, meaning it's something that you can physically feel and process in your body. I want you to think about that 8-hour challenge. Most leaders only do strategic planning in a hotel once a year. At the end of the day, we're gonna get a beer and a coffee, but they almost never have a full day of unfiltered, unmitigated time to just sit with their own thoughts and regulate their own nervous systems. Unfortunately, if we cannot regulate our bodies and stay calm under pressure, we're not gonna be able to regulate teams or a business or achieve those KPIs. Leadership starts with our own physical ability to function in a healthy way. And as we're thinking about the future of work and systems, we have to think about incumbent generations. If you're looking at millennials right now in Gen Z, you'll notice that we're facing a generational job crisis. And outside of a job crisis, there is an existential, emotional crisis that is happening. I know in terms of the varying generations, many people want to say Gen Z, they are lazy and they're sensitive and the millennials want it easy, right? But I think it's very curious that we want to lean into this posture because whether or not we like it, other generations are aging out of the workforce and these generations will be coming in. So there has to be a meeting of the minds. Gen Z and millennials are essentially saying that the way that we work, the way that we engage is not sustainable and it's unhealthy. That we're not centering the human experience. And when we're really looking at essentially the Gen X and the Boomer generation have worked exponentially hard, have invested in really building these systems and these infrastructures, and now we're getting to the point with newer generations where we're saying the systems and the infrastructures were great. They got us to a certain point, but right now in 2026, it's stagnant. We can't do it the same way. It's not working. And it's not working because it was built for you. And now when you think about certain things that are happening, you're thinking about AI that is automating entry-level tasks that used to serve as training wheels for future leaders, we have a bit of a problem. In 2026, many organizations are reducing entry-level hiring because they believe that AI can handle routine coding or administrative work. However, this is creating a structural deadlock. If we don't hire and train young people now, there will be no one with the muscle memory or the confidence to lead in 10 years. We want to avoid the junior talent trap. Leaders, we have to design systems that allow technology and young talent to work together, using AI as a partner to flex our brain muscles and practice critical thinking rather than a replacement that leads to long-term muscle weakness. I bring up the muscle weakness because so many people are saying, hey, I'm realizing that I'm reading a book and I can't process and I can't articulate what's inside that book anymore. And if that's the case, we have a problem. I see for myself as a millennial, I have had the gift of doing everything manually. I know what it looks like to run an analysis by myself and write a 100-page report on my own. I know what that looks like. And now there's AI available, and if I want to use it as a resource, I can do that. I have the skill and the understanding and the capacity to do that. But when we're taking shortcuts and we're building entire infrastructures that essentially deviate away from the elementary, basic level understanding that is required for individual success, we're cheating ourselves. We're cheating ourselves out of experience. And the people that are strongest are gonna be the ones that have the experience. So these are things that we really need to pay attention to. Efficiency is great. We can cut costs. That's exceptional. Productivity is exceptional. But what happens 10, 20 years from now when no one understands how we started and how we got here? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves as we're completely decimating and getting rid of the human capital and what I call institutional wisdom. Institutional wisdom is one of the biggest assets that you as an organization will have. Whilst we're thinking about getting rid of staff and cutting costs, including some of your most senior staff, you're getting rid of the people that actually know the nuances and they understand the in-betweens of the business. I don't care what anybody tells me, AI can't do that. AI is scraping from everywhere it can, but it cannot scrape from here. It cannot scrape from human wisdom. It does not have a soul. And I know that may be a debate for some people, whether or not it does. It does not. It's tech. It's technology. It's exceptional. It's innovative. I love it for what it can do. But I will always stand behind humans, and we need to have a human-centered approach before anything else, especially as we're entering this 2030 renaissance. There's another thing that we need to start talking about as well, which is the neurological cost of cognitive offloading. Yeah. There is a real cost to our over-reliance on technology. When we stop using our brains for deep, consistent tasks, our muscle for critical thinking and reading comprehension begins to weaken. I can't tell you how many people are saying it. We're seeing a rise in intellectual passivity where people who once read grand novels can barely process a white paper. And let's not even get into a white paper. We can talk about generalized articles because their brains have been trained to quick solution engines rather than deep engagement models. Studies show that over-reliance on LLMs like ChatGPT results in lower brain engagement and a soulless quality of work. I know you've read some articles or some things and you've had questions. It's like, almost like there's air. Like poof, like it doesn't have body and presence. Remember I shared earlier, leadership is a somatic and a cognitive experience. So if we're outsourcing our thinking to machines, we're gonna lose the raw fabric needed for high-level problem solving. A Renaissance leader is going to protect the team's brain malleability by ensuring that technology serves as a catalyst for growth and not a crutch. Outsourcing our brains completely to AI creates muscle weakness in the brain. This is something that we need to pay attention to and we cannot let slide personally and within our organizations. I know it's easy, I know we're tired, but ultimately it's not worth it long term. In the midst of all of this, and I know I've spoken so much about global leadership and some of the trends that I'm seeing of late, and for quite some time, people were talking about the fact that we were quiet quitting, and now the language and the verbiage has changed to quiet cracking. And in some ways, the breaking of the human spirit. So we're moving into this new phase, and it's a hidden crisis where high performers don't just disengage, they're starting to buckle and burn out under the pressure of some of these zombie automations and high performance expectations. You see, quiet cracking, when a top-tier employee suddenly dims because they're being forced to work like a machine. I know for myself, I've been in situations where I was working 15 or 17 hours just to keep up with a system that was not built to breathe. And for myself, I did much of it because I was so focused on meeting the mission and the vision, and I cared so deeply about the work, but the light started to leave my eyes. I started to dim. I put on, 60 pounds. If you saw me last year, I had gotten to almost 200 pounds. I had completely forgotten myself. I completely had forgotten, why am I doing the work that I'm doing? And it's because we get trapped in the system. And for myself, I so deeply wanted to meet the American dream, and I did meet it, but at great sacrifice. This quiet cracking is silent, and it's like there's an angry belly under it. And this is something that touches me and affects me deeply because I feel like I had to pull myself out of that space. This is bigger than traditional burnout. It manifests sometimes as a decline in initiative, while delivery metrics look fine on the surface. And I know from my high performers out there, similar to myself, you are very good at smiling and letting everyone think you're okay. And real talk, deep down inside, you're struggling. And I know for me, that was the reality for quite some time, that I was doing my absolute best and working so hard and aiming to meet the goals and the KPIs for my own ambition and for the sake of everyone else. And I'll share a story. In 2022, I had heart failure and passed away and had the opportunity to come back. And I did come back a different person. I changed. As some would say, I met God and I changed. But that rat race energy, that survival energy was still deep inside of me. And it wasn't until 2025 where I made serious decisions to walk away from certain things. And this is where this Renaissance concept came from for me, because I was looking at myself in the mirror and realized, you know what, Samantha, you have not looked at yourself in the mirror for a really long time. You've forgotten yourself. I didn't look like myself anymore. I wasn't smiling anymore. There was no more light in my eyes. I wasn't passionate anymore. For what? But again, this is systemic because it's not only about you as an individual, it's about the system that is in place. As we're thinking about moving into the future, I so badly want a better future for my child. I'm looking in the world and seeing what's there, and I feel deep concern. We deserve better, but we have to build it. This is where that personal accountability comes in. So many people do not have jobs right now. So many people are thinking about where to start. There's so many new startups that are popping up every single day. When you're creating these new startups, or when you're within an existing business, I want you to think about not today, I want you to think about 10 years from now. Is this an organization that people can breathe in? Is this an organization that people actually want to show up to? Do you want to show up to it? Do you like it? Are you passionate about it? Are you happy with it? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves. Organizations that are built on fear and efficiency at any cost eventually break the human spirit. To achieve a renaissance, we must build breathable systems that prioritize psychological safety and human-centered check-ins, proving that a company can thrive without sacrificing the light in its people's eyes. And this is where we really have to get into that empathetic space. I see like this empathy algorithm conflict. Leaders are being forced into the dark ages trap, where they're being told to lead with empathy while simultaneously being measured by heartless, efficiency-driven algorithms. Many leaders feel a crushing weight because they want to be caring human beings, but the pressure to cut costs and hit pumping out metrics like that 15-minute physician visit makes empathy feel like a liability instead of a strength. I get it. I'm not unrealistic. Yes, empathy is important, but I think it will be a lot easier if we're building better systems. When we're building breathable systems, the infrastructure that handles the efficiency, which frees the leader to actually care for their people so you're not punished on the clock. And as we're thinking about generations that are coming in, I'm seeing a major leadership vacuum. We're seeing this leadership vacuum because millennials and Gen Z are looking at the 24/7 firefighting and the total lack of freedom in current roles and simply saying no thank you. Younger generations are seeing the high cost of traditional leadership, the stress, the quiet cracking, the surrender of personal life, and they're choosing to stay in a sovereign state or even in flattened roles rather than stepping into C-suite that looks like a war zone. I'm just giving perspective from the outside. And I know in the chat, some people may not be happy with what I'm saying, but irregardless of whether or not you like it, if we're trying to attract the next generation, we need to really move from this expertise for hire model and really think about this architecture model, right? We have to prove that leadership can be designed, create a legacy that is not just about surviving the workday, but really about meeting the business and meeting the people simultaneously. I think there is a deep disconnect between what legacy institutions offer and what new generations want. But we have to remember that today's reluctant workers are a direct product of the generations that raised them. When critics call younger workers lazy, we're ignoring the fact that Gen X and boomers raised them to value their time and their well-being. These young people are simply reflecting the reckoning that their parents felt, but perhaps couldn't act upon. So you're just in a stage right now where people are saying, hey, we're not doing it. Let's do better. Let's build better. So instead of fighting this generational shift, this is really important for leaders to use it as a catalyst in this new renaissance. We need to build systems that respect this desire for sovereignty and human-centered results, ensuring that our organizations can stand the test of time. We really have to focus on our power of choice in this automated world. Many leaders feel trapped by their circumstances because they've forgotten that choice is the most powerful tool we as humans possess. I often hear leaders say, I didn't realize I had a choice. Because they're so caught up in this modern dark ages of blind automation and systemic friction that they feel like they're just swirling around in the middle of crisis rather than directing it. True leadership isn't about surrendering to the speed of the world. It's about having the power of choice to build a system so well that you aren't consistently forced to react. Strategic foresight is very important. Some of the biggest challenges I see in business come from a lack of strategic foresight. So when you're looking 3 months, 5 months, 18 months ahead, sometimes leaders feel like they don't have any options. I was recently working with some founders in the housekeeping industry that are trying to expand, but they felt overwhelmed by the day-to-day. By focusing on what the organization would look like 18 months from now, we moved them from firefighting to architecture. Strategic foresight is the bridge from what I call the reckoning, that's your crisis, to the renaissance human brilliance. When you plan with intention, you regain the ability to choose your path instead of being pushed by the momentum. And as a result, this is where you start to build that really sovereign infrastructure. You shouldn't just build an efficient company. You should build a breathable system that gives you the freedom to step away from the noise. If there is noise, you would have had an infrastructure in place to really manage the noise. At my company, in True People Consulting, we have what we call a strategy lab. Once the organization goes through this strategy lab and has a roadmap, they're clear on where they need to go. You can build and protect your time and your sanity and your business. This is really something that I think people need to consider. The way of working has changed overnight. When is the last time you took a step back as a leader to just focus on your strategy? Don't try to fix everything at once. My recommendation is always to map out the friction points, find out where exactly is cracking, what is happening. Do a clear analysis and understand where you're trying to go, and then build a roadmap to what I call the renaissance. If you are thinking about yourself in this session with me today, if you're a leader that really wants to recalibrate your own somatic state, or you need a strategy right now, feel free to reach out. We are offering high intensity leadership sprint for a few people this month. This is essentially for you, the leader, who may be experiencing quiet cracking, or you see it in your team. Maybe you need a one-on-one reprieve to find your footing again. But maybe you don't need that. Maybe it's your institution. Maybe you need something a bit bigger than that. Within 1 month, we can start to look at your organization, audit your entire infrastructure. In this month, we'll do a deep dive analysis, assessment of your organization's systems, your culture, your strategy. This is what I call a foundational institutional anchor, where we can map out your friction points and design your 18-month roadmap. Strategic foresight is what is going to get you ahead. And I'm really excited to potentially partner with you along with some of my amazing team at True People Consulting. Please feel free to subscribe, to share with a leader or someone, an upcoming leader that needs to hear this. And if you are in need of help, check the link in the bio, check the link in the caption, and we will partner with you and work with you on building your strategy. My name is Samantha Truman of The Culture Room. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Ciao.